My name is Brielle Whitaker. I was 31 years old the night my father threw my 7-year-old daughter out into a raging thunderstorm. For almost 3 hours, my little girl stayed curled up inside a concrete storm drain while rain flooded the streets above her. Thunder shook the ground beneath her body. Wind cut through her thin pajamas until she couldn't stop trembling. She weighed barely 50 pounds, and my father shoved her outside like she was nothing more than a problem he wanted gone. And he did it because of a lie. A lie told by her 11-year-old cousin. A lie nobody in my family even bothered questioning because believing him was easier than admitting the truth about the people they had spent years protecting. What happened later that night inside the hospital room changed my family forever. But by then, they had no idea I had already made the decision that would destroy everything they thought they controlled. I joined the military when I was 18 because it was the only escape route my father couldn't block. Warren Whitaker had a very specific idea of what a daughter should be. Stay close to home, marry young, depend on family, never question the people providing for you. My older sister, Corinne, fit that picture perfectly. She married her high school boyfriend at 22, had a son a year later, and bought a house less than 15 minutes from my parents in Chattanooga, Tennessee. My father treated her like she'd done everything right in life. I chose ROTC instead, then officer training, then a logistics assignment at Fort Liberty in North Carolina. Every step I took away from home made my father colder toward me. By 25, I was pregnant. The father was a civilian contractor named Nolan. He disappeared when I was 6 months along. No goodbye, no explanation. Just an empty apartment and a short note saying he wasn't ready to be a father. So I raised my daughter alone. Her name was Harlow. She grew up around military housing, packed duffel bags, and rushed dinners between my shifts. I learned how to survive on exhaustion and routine. I stretched every paycheck, took every extra assignment I could manage, and somehow, for years, I made it work. Then, my deployment orders came through. 9 months in Qatar, 72 hours to finalize my military family care plan. Every parent in the service understands what that means. You choose someone to care for your child while you're overseas. You sign temporary guardianship paperwork and pray you picked the right people. My parents volunteered before I even asked. My mother sounded gentle and reassuring on the phone. "She's our granddaughter, Brielle. Of course we'll take care of her." At the time, it felt like the safest choice. Harlow would have a backyard, good schools, and grandparents who had already raised children before. The alternative was leaving her with another officer's wife she'd barely knew. So I signed the papers. Warren and Elaine Whitaker became Harlow's temporary guardians while I deployed overseas. Every month, I transferred $1,200 into their account for groceries, school supplies, clothes, and childcare expenses. My father never once mentioned the money. Later, I found out he never even told Corinne about it. Corinne's son, Maddox, already practically lived at my parents' house full-time. He had his own bedroom there, shelves packed with toys, baseball posters covering the walls, and a glowing astronaut nightlight beside his bed. When Harlow arrived with her little suitcase, my mother put her in the guest room on a fold-out couch with no curtains over the windows. I didn't know any of that at the time. Harlow never complained, and whenever I asked my mother if everything was going okay, she always gave me the same answer. "She's adjusting just fine." That was the first lie. The night before I deployed, I sat beside Harlow on her bed in our apartment and handed her a military dependent ID card. "My number's on the back," I told her. "If anything ever happens and someone finds you, they can call me, no matter where I am." She traced her fingers over the plastic quietly. "Even if you're in another country?" "Even then." She stayed quiet for a few seconds before asking something that should have scared me far more than it did. "What if Grandpa gets mad again?" I stopped packing immediately. "Again?" She looked down at her blanket. "He just yells sometimes." "What kind of yelling?" "Like when Maddox breaks stuff and Grandpa thinks I did it." I knelt in front of her. "Has Grandpa ever scared you?" Harlow gave me a tiny shrug, the kind kids use when they're too young to explain fear properly. I told myself I was overthinking things. I convinced myself my father was strict, not dangerous. I convinced myself my daughter would be safe. I was wrong. And by the time I understood how wrong I'd been, my little girl was hiding inside a storm drain 4 blocks away from my parents' house. Qatar was 18 hours ahead of Tennessee, and my days blurred together into heat, sand, and 12-hour logistics shifts that never really ended. Every week, I scheduled video calls with Harlow during her lunch break back home. At least, that was the plan. But somehow, every call always happened from my parents' kitchen instead. "Better signal in here," my mother kept saying. It took me less than 2 weeks to realize the real reason. My mother was always hovering nearby, always in the frame, always listening. Harlow used to talk non-stop before I deployed. She could spend 20 minutes explaining a bug she found outside, or a weird dream she had, or every single detail about recess. But after a few weeks at my parents' house, her answers became short. Careful. "How's school, baby?" "Good." "What'd you do today?" "Stuff." "You and Maddox getting along okay?" A pause. "Yeah." Nothing about her sounded normal anymore. She kept glancing off camera like she was waiting for permission to speak. The first time I asked my mother if something was wrong, she brushed it off immediately. "She's adjusting, Brielle. Kids go through phases." "Can I talk to her alone next time?" "The Wi-Fi works best in the kitchen." I should have pushed harder. I didn't. A few weeks later, I noticed something else. Harlow stopped saying Maddox's name completely. It used to be, "Maddox showed me his baseball cards," or "Maddox and I played outside." Now it was just silence anytime I brought him up. "Everything okay with you two?" "Yeah." "You sure?" "Can I go now? Grandma says lunch is ready." Every call ended faster than the one before it. Then the care package arrived. Brown cardboard box with my mother's handwriting crooked across the label. Inside were gummy candies Harlow loved, a school picture, and a folded sheet of construction paper. I opened the drawing while sitting on my bunk. On the left side were 4 stick figures standing together holding hands. A tall man, a woman with curly hair, another woman beside a boy. Bright colors, big smiles. On the far right side stood one tiny figure all by herself. Brown hair, no smile. At the bottom, in careful handwriting, she had written 2 words, "My family." I stared at that drawing for a long time. My daughter had drawn herself outside the family. I called home immediately. My father answered. "What?" "I got a drawing from Harlow." "So?" "She drew everyone together holding hands. She drew herself standing alone." A long silence. Then he grunted. "Kids draw stupid things. Stop reading into everything. She drew herself outside the family. She's fine. Maybe if you were home instead of playing soldier overseas, your daughter wouldn't be drawing sad little pictures." Then he hung up on me. I sat there staring at my phone for almost a minute before pulling out the small green notebook I kept locked inside my footlocker. I wrote down the date, everything he said, everything I noticed. Then I folded Harlow's drawing and slipped it into the chest pocket of my uniform. It stayed there for months. After that, I started paying attention to details I should have noticed sooner. Harlow's school had an online parent portal, attendance logs, pickup records, teacher notes. I checked it every morning before work. Maddox Brooks, picked up daily at 3:15 p.m. by Warren Whitaker. Harlow Whitaker, enrolled in after-school care until 5:30 p.m. Every single day. Maddox got picked up immediately. My daughter waited alone for over 2 hours. I called the school pretending I just wanted an update. The receptionist sounded kind. "Harlow's doing well academically," she told me. "Very quiet though. Does someone pick her up every day?" "Yes, her grandmother usually comes around 5:30, sometimes later." Maddox's birthday came first that year. I saw photos online. Huge backyard party, bounce house, pizza, 20 kids running through the yard. My parents smiling behind piles of presents. Then January came. Harlow's birthday. My mother texted me one picture. Harlow sitting alone at the kitchen table beside a grocery store cake. No balloons, no friends, no candles. Just a paper plate and my mother standing behind her. I called immediately. Why was her birthday so different from Maddox's? My mother sighed like I was being difficult. "We already spent a lot this month, Brielle. Besides, Harlow didn't ask for a party. She's 7 years old. Of course she wanted one. Maddox lives here full-time. Harlow's situation is temporary." Temporary. She said it so casually, like my daughter was a visitor instead of family. That word stayed with me the rest of the night. temporary. That was when I realized something I should have understood months earlier. Inside my parents' house, my daughter was treated like a guest. Maddox was treated like the real grandchild. At 3 in the morning, I sat at a military workstation and started typing a hardship reassignment request. Military regulations allow emergency return when family care conditions change significantly. I attached everything: school records, pickup logs, counselor contact information, a scanned copy of Harlow's drawing. The next morning, Colonel Hayes called me into his office. He read the paperwork in silence before looking up at me. "Lieutenant Whitaker," he said carefully, "is your daughter safe?" I answered honestly, "I don't know, sir." And that was the problem. Colonel Hayes approved the request that same afternoon. Before I even left his office, I made another phone call. Captain Selina Vale, JAG officer. 3 years earlier, we'd been stationed together at Fort Sill, and I once covered one of her inspections when her son ended up hospitalized with pneumonia. She owed me a favor, and I hated that I needed to collect on it this way. She answered on the second ring. "Vale? It's Brielle." A short pause. "Well, damn. You only call when something's on fire." "I need legal advice. Off the record for now." Her tone changed immediately. "What's going on?" I walked outside the operations building before answering. The desert air felt like opening an oven door. "My parents are my daughter's designated caregivers while I'm deployed. I think there's favoritism. Emotional neglect, maybe. I don't know how bad it is yet. Document everything. No hesitation, no doubt. Every text, every school record, every date. If this turns into a custody fight later, you need proof that your concerns existed before anything major happened." "There hasn't been an incident." "Then stay ahead of one." That sentence stayed in my head for weeks. Stay ahead of one. So I started building a file. Every phone call with my parents got logged into the green notebook. Every strange comment, every excuse, every screenshot from the school portal. I saved everything into a folder on my laptop labeled Family. I didn't tell my parents I was trying to come home early. I didn't tell Corinne either. The only people who knew were Colonel Hayes and Selina. 2 months passed like that. 2 months of paperwork and waiting. 2 months of watching my daughter slowly disappear through a phone screen. And during those 2 months, Maddox kept lying about Harlow. At first, the lies sounded small, petty, easy to dismiss. One afternoon, a television remote got broken during a tantrum over a video game. Maddox threw it across the room hard enough to crack it against the wall. When my father stormed into the living room demanding answers, Maddox pointed at Harlow immediately. "She dropped it." Harlow said she didn't. My father told her to stop lying and sent her upstairs. Another time, my mother baked cookies for Maddox's school party. Half the tray disappeared overnight. Maddox blamed Harlow before anyone even asked what happened. The truth was, he'd snuck them to a kid down the street. Nobody cared enough to ask my daughter for her side. My mother just told her, "You need to learn some self-control." Then came the school incident. Maddox told a teacher Harlow called him names during recess. The school separated them for a week while staff tried figuring out what happened. No witnesses backed up his story, but by then the damage was already done. Harlow spent lunch alone for days. Every single time the pattern stayed the same. Maddox accused, adults believed him, Harlow denied it. Adults dismissed her. Eventually, she stopped defending herself at all. According to the school counselor, she mostly drew pictures instead. I learned that later from Mrs. Bennett, the elementary school counselor who'd been quietly meeting with Harlow every week since November. Harlow trusted her because Mrs. Bennett never interrupted when she drew. She simply sat beside her and waited patiently until Harlow spoke first. One Sunday in February, things got worse. My mother owned a pearl necklace passed down through generations of women in our family. She treated it like sacred glass. Every birthday, every church service, every family event, she wore it carefully before locking it back inside a velvet jewelry box. That afternoon during dinner, she brought the necklace downstairs and showed it to Maddox. "One day, this will belong to you," she told him proudly. His eyes lit up. She actually let him hold it. I found out later Harlow had asked quietly from across the table, "Can I see it too?" My mother barely looked at her. "Not right now, sweetheart. You might drop it." Maddox smirked at her after that, and Corinne laughed. "You know Harlow's clumsy. she said loudly enough for my daughter to hear. Remember the vase? The vase. A ceramic vase Maddox himself had knocked off a shelf while roughhousing weeks earlier. He blamed Harlow for that too, and my parents believed him without question. That night after dinner, Harlow went upstairs alone and spent hours drawing in silence while the rest of the family watched television downstairs. Nobody checked on her. Nobody asked if she was okay. Nobody noticed how quiet she'd become. A week later, my phone rang while I was eating dinner at the base mess hall. Tennessee area code. I stepped outside before answering. Lieutenant Whitaker? This is Gail Bennett from Ridgeview Elementary. I'm Harlow's school counselor. The wind outside smelled like diesel and sand. Is my daughter okay? Physically, yes, she said carefully. But I wanted to discuss some concerns. I gripped the railing beside the building while she spoke. Harlow had become increasingly withdrawn since January. She barely interacted with other kids anymore. She spent recess alone drawing. She flinched any time adults raised their voices nearby. Then Mrs. Bennett said something that made my entire body go cold. She told me her grandfather says she isn't a real Whitaker. I closed my eyes immediately. The heat pressed against my face like fire. He said that? Yes. Those were her exact words. Not a real Whitaker. My father used almost those same words on me years earlier when I enlisted. Real Whitakers stay with family, he told me back then. Now he was saying it to my little girl, 7 years old, tiny enough that her feet still dangled from chairs. Mrs. Bennett kept speaking gently. I'm not filing a formal report yet, but I felt you needed to know. Can you email me your session notes? Yes. The second we hung up, I forwarded everything to Selena. Then I added 3 more pages to the green notebook. My father hadn't changed at all. He'd simply found someone smaller to control. The next day, I called Corinne. I thought maybe we could have a calm conversation as sisters. 2 mothers talking honestly. The call lasted less than 5 minutes. Is Harlow okay over there? I asked carefully. Her counselor says she's becoming withdrawn. Corinne sighed dramatically into the phone. She's fine, Brielle. She just needs to learn her place. I went completely still. What does that mean? It means she acts like a guest instead of helping out. Maddox helps Dad in the garage. Maddox sets the table without being asked. Harlow just hides in her room drawing all day. She's 7. Maddox had responsibilities at 7. Maddox also has his own bedroom and both parents living at home. Silence. Then Corinne said something I still don't think I'll ever fully forgive. I told Mom and Dad maybe they should just adopt Harlow permanently. My chest tightened instantly. What? You're never home anyway, Brielle. She needs stability. She needs a real family environment. I couldn't even speak for a second. My sister was talking about my daughter like I'd abandoned her. Like motherhood was some temporary assignment I failed. I'm just saying what everybody's already thinking, she continued. I hung up without another word. Then I opened my laptop and started drafting formal custody review notes for military legal services. Because that was the moment I stopped thinking of this as family tension and started seeing it for what it really was. They were trying to replace me. 3 weeks later, my reassignment request was approved. I still remember the exact look on Colonel Hayes's face when he handed me the paperwork. Relief mixed with concern. Go home and handle this, Lieutenant, he told me quietly. Your daughter needs you more than the Army needs supply reports. I packed in under an hour. Uniforms, laptop, the green notebook. Harlow's drawing folded carefully inside my chest pocket. Everything else could stay behind. The flight from Qatar felt endless. Layovers blurred together. Airports, security lines, sleepless turbulence. By the time I landed in Nashville, my body felt hollowed out from exhaustion. I rented a car with my military ID and drove straight to a Holiday Inn, about 10 minutes from my parents' neighborhood. I didn't call them. I didn't tell anyone I was back. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed staring at my phone before finally calling Selena. I'm stateside. Good, she answered immediately. I already prepared the revocation paperwork for the family care plan. I can officially file it Monday morning. What happens after that? Your parents lose temporary guardianship immediately. Legal custody reverts fully back to you. If they refuse to return Harlow, we go straight to family court. I stared at the hotel wall quietly. And if something happens before Monday? A pause. Then you call 911 first, she said carefully, and me second. Before hanging up, she gave me one last warning. Don't confront them emotionally, Brielle. Your father will play victim. Your mother will cry. Your sister will make you look unstable and selfish for deploying. Let the process work. I hated that she was right. The next morning, I drove to Ridgeview Elementary before school let out. Mrs. Bennett was waiting for me in her office, holding a thick manila folder with Harlow's name written across the tab in blue marker. The second I sat down, she opened it. Inside were months of drawings, every single one dated carefully. September, Harlow and Maddox sitting together smiling at a table. October, a family group picture with Harlow drawn slightly farther away from everyone else, still smiling, but separated. November, the distance between her and the others grew larger, nobody touching her anymore. December, a giant red figure with an angry mouth towering over a tiny crying child at the bottom of the page. Her grandfather? I asked quietly. Mrs. Bennett nodded once. January, Maddox standing in the center surrounded by balloons and presents, while a small girl sat alone in the corner with an X drawn over her body. February, only two figures remained in the drawing. One small girl, one taller person wearing green, holding hands. At the bottom, in shaky handwriting, Harlow had written, "What I want." My throat tightened so hard it hurt. "She drew you in uniform," Mrs. Bennett said softly. I turned the paper over in my hands 3 times before answering. "I know." Then she handed me 12 pages of counseling notes, behavioral observations, emotional withdrawal, fear responses, direct quotes from Harlow herself. I photographed every single page, every drawing, every date. Then I sat in my rental car afterward, gripping the steering wheel while I cried so hard I couldn't breathe properly. 7 months overseas. 7 months trusting people who were slowly teaching my daughter she didn't belong anywhere. That afternoon, I parked across the street from my parents' house around 3:30 and waited. The school bus arrived 10 minutes later. Maddox got off first. My father walked outside immediately smiling like always. He took Maddox's backpack, ruffled his hair, laughed at something he said, and walked him inside. The front door stayed open for him. 20 minutes later, Harlow's bus arrived. My little girl stepped off, slowly adjusting the straps on her backpack. She walked up the driveway alone. The front door was closed. She knocked. I felt my stomach twist instantly. My daughter had been living there for over a year, and she still knocked before entering. My mother opened the door. No hug, no smile. I could faintly hear her say, "Wipe your feet and move your stuff from the hallway." 30 seconds later, Harlow disappeared upstairs. Through the front window, I could still see Maddox sprawled across the couch with snacks, watching television. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my fingers hurt. Then I called someone I trusted more than my own family at that point. Mrs. Holloway. 72 years old, lived next door to my parents since before I was born. When she answered and heard my voice, she sounded instantly emotional. "Brielle? Honey, you're home? I need to ask you something about Harlow." Silence for a moment. Then she sighed heavily. "That poor little girl sits on the porch alone almost every evening," she admitted quietly, "while your daddy plays outside with Maddox." My chest tightened. "Have you seen anything else?" "Your father yells at her a lot. I hear it through the walls sometimes." "Since when?" "Christmas, maybe. Maybe before." I wrote down every word she said, dates, times, descriptions. That night around 7:15, I drove back to my parents' house again. The kitchen light glowed through the curtains. Television flickered in the living room. Then I heard my father shouting before I even stepped out of the car. "I told you to clean up after dinner!" Harlow's tiny voice answered from somewhere inside. "I did clean up, Grandpa." "Don't talk back to me." Then footsteps on the stairs. Silence. My hand wrapped around the car door handle. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to walk inside and take my daughter home immediately. But Selena's warning kept echoing in my head. Let the system work. If I exploded emotionally before the paperwork got filed, my parents would twist everything. So I forced myself to stay inside the car. I backed out of the driveway, shaking with rage so hard I could barely see straight. That three-point turn was the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. Back at the hotel, I called Selena immediately. "File the revocation paperwork first thing tomorrow morning. It'll be submitted by 9. "What if something happens tonight?" "Then call 911, she repeated carefully. "And call me right after." I barely slept at all. I spent most of the night staring at the ceiling, counting the hours until morning. 9 hours until official paperwork. 9 hours until I could legally remove Harlow from that house without a fight. 9 hours trusting nothing catastrophic would happen before then. But I didn't have 9 hours, because the storm came that night, and everything fell apart before sunrise. Around 8:30 that evening, my mother went upstairs to get dressed for church the next morning. When she opened the velvet jewelry box on her dresser, the pearl necklace was gone. She searched the bedroom first, then the bathroom, then every drawer downstairs. Panic spread through the house almost instantly. My father stood up from his recliner, furious. "What do you mean it's missing?" "I can't find it anywhere." Maddox sat quietly in the living room, watching everything unfold. Then, after about a minute, he walked over to my father. "Grandpa," he said carefully, "I saw Harlow put something inside her backpack after school." That was all it took. My father didn't ask questions, didn't hesitate, didn't even consider another possibility. He marched straight upstairs, grabbed Harlow's backpack from the guest room floor, and dumped it open. The pearl necklace fell out immediately. What nobody knew yet was that Maddox himself had stolen it earlier that afternoon and hidden it inside her bag while she was upstairs doing homework. 11 years old, and he already understood exactly how to weaponize favoritism. My father's face turned crimson with rage. "Harlow, get down here right now." She came downstairs wearing star-patterned pajama pants and a long-sleeved shirt that said, "Future Scientist," across the front. Barefoot, confused, completely unaware her life was about to change forever. Outside, the storm had been building for hours. Rain hammered the windows sideways. Wind rattled gutters hard enough to shake the roof. The kind of Tennessee thunderstorm that floods streets and knocks branches across power lines. Inside the house, my father held the pearl necklace up like evidence in a courtroom. "You stole this from your grandmother." Harlow looked terrified immediately. "I didn't! It was in your backpack. I don't know how it got there." He threw the backpack across the floor. "For 2 years I've put up with your attitude." My mother stood behind him, clutching the necklace to her chest. She never defended Harlow, never asked questions, never once considered she might be innocent. Then Corinne arrived after my parents called her. She walked inside, crossed her arms, and stared at my little girl sitting on the stairs. "This is what happens when kids don't have structure," she muttered. Maddox stood silently near the living room doorway, picking nervously at his fingernails. He already knew things had gone further than he expected. My father leaned toward Harlow. "You have anything to say for yourself?" "I didn't take it." "Maddox saw you." Thunder cracked so loudly outside the windows rattled. Harlow curled tighter against the staircase railing. She wasn't crying. She'd gone completely still. The kind of still children learn when they realize the adults around them are no longer safe. Then my father said the words that eventually put my daughter in a hospital bed. "I'm done with you." My father stood over Harlow on the staircase while thunder shook the windows behind him. "I'm done with you," he repeated. His voice filled the hallway so completely it felt like the walls themselves were listening. 2 years of lying. 2 years of disrespect, stealing from this family." "I didn't steal anything," Harlow whispered. Maddox doesn't lie. He said it instantly, automatically, like it was a law of nature instead of an opinion. Maddox doesn't lie. I would later hear those exact words repeated in police reports, CPS notes, and witness statements because that sentence explained everything wrong inside that house. My mother touched my father's arm nervously. "Walter, maybe we should calm down." He jerked away from her. "No, she needs consequences." Corinne stepped closer with her arms crossed. "Dad's right. This has gone on long enough." Maddox still said nothing. He stood frozen near the doorway, chewing at the skin around his thumb, while the lie he created grew bigger and uglier in front of him. My father grabbed Harlow's backpack off the floor and shoved it against her chest. "You want to act like you don't belong in this family?" he snapped. "Fine." Harlow looked at him first. Then she looked at my mother. My mother's eyes were watery, but she stayed silent. Didn't step forward. Didn't protect her. Then Harlow looked toward Corinne. My sister barely glanced up from checking notifications on her phone. My daughter searched every adult in that hallway for someone willing to help her. Nobody did. My father walked to the front door and yanked it open. The storm noise exploded into the house immediately. Rain hammered the porch. Wind pushed the door hard enough to slam it against the wall. And then my father pointed outside. "Get out." Harlow froze. "I don't want a lying granddaughter in my house." Those words left his mouth at exactly 8:53 p.m. Later, the timestamp appeared in official reports because Mrs. Holloway remembered looking at her microwave clock when she heard shouting through the walls next door. The temperature outside had dropped sharply in less than 2 hours. Rainwater already flooded the gutters. Tree branches scraped violently against rooftops. And my 7-year-old little girl stood there barefoot in pajamas, holding a backpack too big for her shoulders. She didn't scream, didn't argue, didn't beg. That was the part that broke me most after I learned everything. She simply obeyed, quietly, like she already believed she deserved it. She slipped her arms through the backpack straps and walked toward the open doorway. The second she stepped outside, rain drenched her completely. Within seconds, her hair stuck flat against her face. My father slammed the door behind her. Next door, Mrs. Holloway was rinsing dishes when she heard it happen. The shouting, the door, then silence. She looked out her kitchen window and saw a tiny figure walking alone down the sidewalk in the middle of the storm. Bare feet splashing through rainwater, pajamas soaked, backpack clutched tightly against her chest. Mrs. Holloway grabbed her phone immediately and dialed 911. "There's a child outside alone in this storm," she told dispatch. "She just got thrown out of the house next door." Inside my parents' home, nobody went after Harlow. That detail still haunts me. Nobody checked the porch. Nobody looked outside. Nobody even opened the door again. My mother sat at the kitchen table, holding the pearl necklace, while my father paced angrily through the living room. "She'll come back when she's ready to apologize," he kept saying. Corinne grabbed Maddox and prepared to leave before the weather worsened. But according to Maddox's later interview, he hesitated near the doorway before leaving. 5 full seconds staring at the front door, knowing exactly what he'd caused, still saying nothing. Harlow walked 4 blocks through that storm before she found somewhere to hide. A drainage tunnel beside the road large enough for a child to crawl inside. She curled up there, hugging her knees while freezing rainwater rushed past outside. For almost 3 hours. 3 hours. Every time I think about it, I still feel sick. Officer Mateo Ruiz responded to the 911 call. He drove the neighborhood slowly with floodlights sweeping across the streets, while dispatch updated him about the missing child. The first 2 passes found nothing. On the 3rd pass, his flashlight caught the reflection of something shiny deep inside a concrete drainage opening. Harlow's backpack reflector. He crawled down far enough to reach her. According to his report, she was shaking so violently she could barely speak. Her feet were bleeding from running barefoot across wet pavement. Her lips had turned blue from the cold, and even then, she still held her backpack protectively against her chest. Officer Ruiz wrapped her in an emergency thermal blanket from his patrol car and called for paramedics immediately. The ambulance arrived within minutes. Mild hypothermia, cuts on both feet, bruised knees, elevated heart rate, dehydration. Not life-threatening, but close enough to terrify everyone involved. At County General Hospital, one of the nurses searched Harlow's backpack for identification, while doctors worked on warming her body temperature. Inside the front pocket, she found the military-dependent ID card I'd clipped there months earlier. My name, my number. The nurse called at 9:37 p.m. I was sitting alone inside the hotel room, staring at the ceiling when my phone rang with a local Tennessee number. County General Hospital, the woman said gently. We have your daughter. I was already grabbing my car keys before she finished speaking. The drive took 11 minutes. I don't remember traffic lights. I don't remember parking properly. I only remember running through the emergency room doors soaked in rain because I forgot my jacket in the car. A nurse pointed me toward room 4. Harlow looked impossibly small in that hospital bed. IV line taped to her arm, hospital gown hanging off her shoulders, wet hair spread across the pillow, monitors blinking softly beside her. I sat beside her immediately and grabbed her hand. I'm here, I whispered. I've got you. Her eyes opened slowly. Mommy? Yeah, baby. She started crying the second she heard my voice. Not loud sobbing, just exhausted little tears sliding silently down her cheeks. And in her other hand, crumpled tightly against her palm, was a drawing. 2 stick figures holding hands, one small, one wearing green. Me. About 20 minutes later, a hospital social worker entered the room carrying a clipboard. Natalie Mercer, she introduced herself quietly. I need to ask a few questions. I never let go of Harlow's hand while answering. She asked who I was, asked who had been supervising Harlow tonight, asked whether my daughter had intentionally been sent outside. I answered everything calmly, carefully, and every answer built a case against my parents without me needing to accuse them directly. Natalie wrote continuously across several forms before finally looking up at me. Child Protective Services will automatically open an investigation, she explained. This qualifies as a child welfare emergency. I understand. Do you have documentation of prior concerns? I looked at my backpack sitting beside the chair. Yes, I answered quietly. A lot of it. After she left, I called Selena immediately. It's happening, I told her. I figured, she said grimly. I'm already driving. Then, about an hour later, the hospital room door opened again. My father walked in first. The second he saw Harlow lying in that hospital bed, all the color drained from his face. Then he noticed me sitting beside her in uniform. His hands started shaking instantly. Actual trembling. He stammered. You're supposed to be overseas. I came home early. My mother stepped into the room behind him. The moment she saw Harlow hooked to monitors, she burst into tears. But even then, her first words weren't about my daughter. If you'd been here, she cried, none of this would have happened. I stared at her in disbelief. I trusted you to be here for her. My father tried to recover quickly. She stole your mother's necklace. No, she didn't. Maddox saw her. She's 7 years old, I cut him off coldly. And we are not doing this inside a hospital room. A nurse appeared in the doorway immediately after hearing raised voices. Please keep it down. I stood slowly beside Harlow's bed, not aggressive, not emotional, just done. CPS will contact both of you tomorrow, I said calmly. My father's face changed instantly. You called CPS on your own parents? The hospital did, I answered. Because that's what happens when a child ends up hospitalized after being thrown outside during a thunderstorm. He opened his mouth, closed it again. For once in his life, he had nothing to say. A minute later, they left. My mother's crying echoed all the way down the hallway. And for the first time since deployment started, I finally understood something clearly. I wasn't fighting to repair my relationship with my parents anymore. I was fighting to protect my daughter from them. The hospital quieted down sometime after midnight. The fluorescent lights dimmed slightly, and the hallway settled into that strange late-night silence hospitals always have. Soft monitor beeps, Distant footsteps, wheels rolling across polished floors. I pulled my chair closer to Harlow's bed and stayed there holding her hand while she slept. Around 1 in the morning, she woke up slowly and looked at me like she was afraid I might disappear again. "Am I in trouble?" she whispered. That question shattered something inside me. "No, baby," I told her immediately. "You are never in trouble for telling the truth." She stared at the blanket for a long moment before speaking again. "Maddox put the necklace in my backpack." Her voice was tiny, careful, like she still expected someone to accuse her of lying. "I saw him do it after school. He thought I was upstairs, but I was sitting on the stairs." I brushed damp hair back from her forehead gently. "Why didn't you tell Grandpa?" She looked at me with the saddest little expression I'd ever seen. "Because Grandpa never believes me when it's about Maddox." I closed my eyes for a second. Not because I didn't believe her, because I did, completely. "I'm going to make sure the right people listen this time," I promised. Harlow's grip around my hand loosened slowly as she drifted back to sleep. I stayed awake the rest of the night organizing everything. School records, screenshots, counselor notes, Mrs. Holloway's contact information, photos of the drawings, every page from the green notebook. At 2:14 a.m., I emailed the entire evidence package to Selena with the subject line, "Emergency Custody Documentation, Whitaker Case." By sunrise, the system was already moving, and once it started, my parents couldn't stop it anymore. Monday morning at 9:15 a.m., CPS investigator Marisol Vega arrived at my parents' house. 14 years of child welfare investigations. Former juvenile crimes detective. No patience for excuses. She interviewed my parents separately first. My father claimed Harlow had run away after being disciplined. My mother claimed Harlow stepped outside to cool off. Two completely different stories within minutes. Vega wrote both statements down carefully. Then she circled the contradiction in red ink. One version involved punishment. The other involved choice. Both couldn't be true. After that, she interviewed Mrs. Holloway next door. Mrs. Holloway already had handwritten notes prepared before CPS even arrived. Dates, times, descriptions of shouting she heard through the walls for months. According to Vega later, Mrs. Holloway spoke with the calm certainty of someone who had spent weeks debating whether she should say something sooner. "He opened the front door and pointed outside," she told investigators. "That child was barefoot. Did you hear exactly what he said?" "Yes." Mrs. Holloway repeated the words slowly. "Get out. I don't need a lying granddaughter." Vega underlined the quote 3 times in her report. That sentence became the center of the entire investigation. Not speculation, not family drama. A direct eyewitness statement from a 72-year-old retired schoolteacher with no reason to lie. My father had controlled the story inside his house for decades. He never realized neighbors could hear the truth through thin walls. Later that afternoon, CPS interviewed Maddox with a child forensic specialist present. His name was Dr. Everett Klein. Young, patient, very experienced with children who were hiding guilt. Corinne sat in the room during the interview because protocol allowed it, but she was warned not to interrupt or influence answers. Maddox sat across from Dr. Klein, squeezing a foam stress ball while answering questions. "Can you tell me what happened with the necklace? I saw Harlow take it. What time? After school. Where were you?" "In the kitchen." "Could you see her backpack from the kitchen?" Maddox hesitated. I was in the hallway too." Dr. Klein stayed calm. "So first you were in the kitchen, then the hallway?" Maddox squeezed the stress ball harder. "The living room, maybe?" 3 locations in less than 30 seconds. Dr. Klein never corrected him, never pressured him. He simply kept letting the silence grow heavier. Finally, he leaned forward slightly. "Maddox, sometimes kids say things because they're scared, or because an adult told them something important would happen if they did. You're not in trouble for telling the truth here." Maddox immediately looked toward his mother. Corinne's face stayed completely blank, and then everything cracked. "I put it in her backpack," he whispered. Corinne spoke instantly. "He's confused." Dr. Klein raised a hand calmly. "Please let him finish." Maddox stared down at the stress ball. "Mom said Harlow needed to learn her place." Silence. Heavy silence. Then he kept going. "She said if Harlow got in trouble, Grandpa would send her away, and everything would go back to normal." Corinne stood up so fast her chair slammed backward, but the damage was already done. The entire room had gone still. By the time investigators questioned Corinne separately, they already had Mrs. Holloway's statement, the counselor reports, the school records, hospital documentation, and now Maddox's confession. "Did you encourage your son to frame Harlow?" Vega asked directly. "That's ridiculous. Your son stated you instructed him to place the necklace in Harlow's backpack." "He's 11 years old. He doesn't know what he's saying." Vega looked at her evenly. "An 11-year-old's lie nearly killed a child. So yes, I take his statement seriously." Corinne demanded a lawyer after that. The investigation continued anyway. Meanwhile, Harlow stayed with me at the hospital until doctors discharged her later that evening. The first thing she asked when we got into the rental car was something so heartbreakingly small it nearly destroyed me. "Are we going back there?" "No. You promise?" "I swear to you," I told her. "Nobody is ever sending you back there again." She nodded once and leaned her head against the passenger window. Within minutes, she fell asleep from exhaustion. Back at the hotel, I tucked her carefully into bed and sat awake beside her, reviewing paperwork with Selena for almost 3 hours. Emergency guardianship restoration, military care plan revocation, temporary protective orders, custody petitions. Every document represented another brick sealing the door shut behind my parents. 3 days later, CPS scheduled a formal supervised review meeting at the county office. My parents arrived dressed like they were attending church. My father wore a pressed button-down shirt. My mother carried tissues in her purse, already prepared to cry. Their attorney sat between them. Across the table sat me and Selena in dress uniform. Marisol Vega opened the meeting by presenting findings calmly and methodically. Contradictory caregiver statements, witness testimony, counselor observations, medical reports, child forensic interview results. My father interrupted twice before his lawyer physically stopped him. The third time, he snapped completely. "This is a family issue," he barked. "You people are turning discipline into abuse." Vega didn't even blink. An underdressed 7-year-old was found suffering from hypothermia inside a drainage tunnel during severe weather, she replied evenly. "That is not discipline." My mother started crying quietly beside him. "We love her," she whispered. "We made a mistake." I finally spoke for the first time during the meeting. "One mistake?" I asked calmly. I opened the folder in front of me and slid Harlow's drawings across the table one by one. September, October, November, December. The progression of isolation was impossible to ignore. Then I placed the February drawing in front of them, the one labeled, "What I Want." My mother covered her mouth, crying harder. My father couldn't even look at it. "You said if I'd been home, none of this would have happened," I told them quietly. "But I trusted you to protect her while I was gone. That was my mistake." Selena opened another folder afterward. Financial transfers, guardianship records, military documentation, everything official, everything undeniable. My father stared at the paperwork in disbelief. "You're destroying your own family over this." I looked him dead in the eyes. "You threw my daughter into a storm," I answered. "I'm the one giving her shelter." Nobody spoke after that. At the end of the meeting, Marisol Vega delivered the official preliminary findings. Substantiated child neglect. Mandatory supervised visitation only. No unsupervised contact with Harlow pending long-term review. Temporary guardianship permanently revoked. Legal custody restored fully to me, effective immediately. My father's hand started shaking again while she spoke. The same trembling I saw in the hospital room. Fear, finally replacing certainty. "She's my granddaughter," he said weakly. "And that's exactly why this is happening," I replied. My mother reached toward me across the table, trying to touch my hand. I pulled away gently, not angrily, just firmly. "Loving someone doesn't mean you get to hurt them," I told her quietly. That seemed to break her more than anything else said that day. When the meeting ended, my parents walked out looking 20 years older than when they entered. My father stopped once at the doorway like he wanted to argue again. Then he saw the stacks of reports, witness statements, medical records, photographs, and for the first time in his life, he realized control meant nothing once the truth was written down. He left without another word. Out in the lobby, Harlow sat beside one of Selena's assistants, reading a children's book quietly. The second she saw me, she ran straight into my arms. "Are we going home now?" she asked. I held her tightly. "Yeah, baby," I whispered. "We're finally going home." 3 months later, Harlow and I were living back on base at Fort Liberty. Small two-bedroom apartment, nothing fancy, but it was ours. For the first time in over a year, my daughter had her own room again. She picked lavender curtains herself from the exchange store and spent an entire Saturday deciding exactly where she wanted her desk near the window. Every evening after dinner, she sat there drawing while soft music played from the little radio beside her bed. The difference in her was almost immediate. She laughed again, not carefully, not quietly, real laughter, the kind that filled rooms. The Army reassigned me to a stateside logistics coordination position with no overseas deployment eligibility for at least a year. Colonel Hayes signed the recommendation personally. Family court finalized permanent custody arrangements in April. Full legal and physical custody awarded to me. My parents were granted supervised visitation every other Saturday at a monitored family visitation center outside Knoxville. 2 hours. Social worker present the entire time. Nothing unsupervised. The first visit happened in May. I almost didn't go. Even sitting in that parking lot made my stomach tighten. But Harlow deserved the choice to see them if she wanted to. When my parents walked into the visitation room, they looked nervous in a way I had never seen before. My father carried a coloring book under one arm. Horses and flowers. He set it carefully on the table in front of Harlow before sitting down across from her. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The room itself felt painfully artificial. Plastic chairs, beige walls, security camera mounted in the corner, a social worker pretending not to watch every movement. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "I thought maybe you'd like this." Harlow looked at the coloring book quietly. "Thank you." Then silence again. The old version of my father would have filled that silence with authority, questions, demands, instructions. But now he looked like a man afraid even his voice could ruin everything. Eventually, Harlow opened the coloring book and started coloring one of the pages. A few minutes later, my father picked up a pencil too. For 45 minutes, they sat side by side coloring quietly. No yelling. No accusations. No mention of the necklace. No mention of the storm. Near the end of the visit, he finally asked softly, "How's school?" "Good." "What's your favorite class?" "Art." He nodded once. "That makes sense." That was the entire conversation. And somehow it felt heavier than all the screaming he'd done over the years. When the visit ended, my father stood awkwardly beside the table. "I'll see you in 2 weeks, Harlow." She looked up at him. "Okay, Grandpa." Afterward, the supervising social worker quietly told me my father sat alone in his truck for almost 15 minutes before driving away. Apparently, he cried. I didn't know how to feel about that. Part of me wanted to stay angry forever. Another part remembered he was still the man who taught me how to ride a bike and checked under my bed for monsters when I was little. But neither of those truths erased what he did to my daughter, and I refused to let guilt confuse that again. Corinne still hadn't contacted me directly. Not after the CPS investigation. Not after Maddox confessed. Nothing. Her husband eventually returned from his offshore oil rotation and learned the full story from investigators instead of family. According to Selena, the marriage nearly collapsed afterward. Maddox started court-mandated counseling that summer. About a month later, Harlow received a handwritten letter in the mail. I recognized Maddox's writing immediately. "I'm sorry I lied about the necklace. I didn't think Grandpa would really throw you outside. I hope you're not mad at me." Harlow read the letter twice, sitting at the kitchen table. Then she looked up at me carefully. "Do I have to answer him?" I shook my head. "No, baby. You don't have to do anything you're uncomfortable with." She thought quietly for almost an hour before finally taking out paper and writing back herself. "It's okay. I hope you're doing better too." That was it. No anger, no cruelty. Just grace far bigger than anything the adults around her deserved. My mother started calling every Sunday evening after that. The conversations always sounded awkward and fragile. How's Harlow doing? She's good, Mom. Can I send her something? You can mail it to our apartment. Long pauses filled most calls. Eventually, she'd try apologizing again, and every time I stopped her gently. The visitation schedule stays the same. Because apologies didn't rebuild trust. Consistency did. My father never raised his voice during another supervised visit, not once. The social workers documented everything carefully: appropriate tone, appropriate behavior, positive interaction. He brought books sometimes, art supplies, little science kits because he remembered Harlow loved astronomy. And every single visit, his hands still trembled slightly whenever he first saw her. I don't know if it was guilt, fear, shame, maybe all three. But I noticed something else too. Harlow stopped shrinking around him. The first few visits, she barely spoke. Then slowly, week by week, she started talking more. Showing him drawings, explaining school projects. One afternoon, I overheard her explaining the solar system while he listened quietly, like every word mattered. That nearly broke me harder than the storm did. Because it showed me exactly how little she'd ever needed. Not perfection, not expensive gifts, not control, just kindness, just safety, just someone willing to listen. A year later, Mrs. Bennett mailed me copies of Harlow's final counseling evaluations. Healthy emotional recovery, improved social engagement, decreased anxiety responses. One note at the bottom hit me hardest. Patient demonstrates strong resilience once placed in a consistently safe environment. Safe environment. Such simple words, but they changed how I understood parenthood forever. Before all this, I thought protecting my daughter meant providing food, housing, education, and structure. I thought love automatically made people safe. I was wrong. Protecting her actually meant something much harder. It meant paying attention when my instincts whispered that something wasn't right. It meant accepting that family can fail you, and sometimes protecting your child means standing against the people who raised you, not through revenge, not through screaming, but through boundaries, paperwork, truth, and the courage to stop excusing behavior simply because it came from people you loved. Sometimes I still think about that tiny plastic military ID card clipped inside Harlow's backpack. I gave it to her because I believed my parents would protect her while I was gone. But in the end, that card, with my name and number on the back, became the thing that brought my little girl home to me. Not my parents, not my sister, not promises. Just a frightened child holding on to proof that somewhere in the world, her mother would come for her. And I did. If this story reminded you that protecting your child is never an overreaction, then trust your instincts and never ignore the quiet signs that something feels wrong. Sometimes the people we trust most are the ones we need boundaries from the most. Thank you for listening to this story. If it moved you, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you've ever had to choose your child's safety over someone else's feelings, let us know in the comments. See you in the next story.